Hi, today we're going to look at using GitHub as a place for you to store your source code. See if my PowerPoint will go. There we go. And whenever we're programming, we're generating source code, and source code is an asset. It's an asset for the company we're working for, or it's an asset for our own personal projects. And when we're turning things in at school, it's an assignment asset that we would like to make sure we're keeping track of. So we're going to look at some basic setup things that you can do to use GitHub. GitHub has become a widely accepted source code repository. And what is a repository? Here's one that is a repository of books, a giant collection, so we can see it, we can visualize it. Some definitions of repository over here from dictionary.com. It is a central location in which data is stored and managed. So we can think about it as a giant cloud-based file folder for all of our source code. The reason we want to do this, use a repository, is because it allows us to have this central location that stores all our source code, and then we can share that code or access it throughout our entire environment, throughout the world, via the internet or via a cloud-based delivery system. Now, source code management includes many things besides just saving our code. We'll also do version control. So if we were to encounter a problem with changes that we had made, we'd be able to roll back those changes to go to a previous version when everything was working so that we can recover quickly. We also can manage changes so that we can have multiple people on our project team working on the same source code, and GitHub will help us manage all of those changes being merged together back into our central repository. So we have a lot going on with GitHub. For you to get started, the first thing we need to do is access the GitHub educational site. We'll be doing all of these steps after we review. You're going to set up an account using your OTC email because it will be recognized as a valid educational institution, and you'll get your free GitHub private repositories. We want you to have private ones because it would be inappropriate for you to have your assignments placed in a public repository where other people might be able to access your assignment code. Of course, we'd want that kept private. We're going to download the software. There's a couple of different options, lots of different options actually. GitHub Desktop is super easy to use, and of course that's your best bet for at home. But we only are allowed to use GitHub GUI on OTC computers, so that's what I'm going to show you how to use today so that you feel comfortable with what you have available on the computers on the OTC network. Now basically, after we've gotten everything installed, we're going to create a local repository. That'll be a folder on our local computer that we've marked as a folder that GitHub is keeping track of or monitoring. So GitHub is going to be watching everything in that folder, looking for changes, and if we make changes, it's going to allow us to migrate those changes back up to our central repository. Now, when you use your local repository at first, you might need to get a copy of the project that you're working on. If that project's already on GitHub, you would create a branch or use a clone of the current project. So there's some things for you to do a little bit of research on. And then as you make updates to your local version of the project, you're going to revise the remote copy, the copy that's in the cloud, of the project with your changes. So all of your changes are going to be added to a list of staged files until you do a commit on your local computer. A commit is like a file save, only it includes updates to many files in maybe many folders. After you commit, then you can push your changes back up to the remote server. So our remote server, our cloud-based repository, is a central holding location for all of the source code that we have in our project. People can get source code from there so that they can execute the project on their computer, and they can have changes be merged into the source code on the remote machine. Now, there are lots and lots of GitHub tutorials available, so I wanted to get you started today, but you can go to Code Academy or many other places online and find some really good GitHub tutorials, but I think you'll be okay with your knowledge after we get done. So first of all, Let's look at the website where you're going to get your account created. You want to go to education.github.com, and then you're going to request a discount. And as you request a discount, it's going to have you create an account. Again, you're going to use your OTC email, and it will tell you, you'll get a response back from the system that it could be up to 2 weeks before you receive approval. That usually doesn't happen. Usually we're receiving approval very quickly, within 15 minutes or so, as long as you use that recognized otc.edu domain in your email address. So get that account created. Notice that as a student, you have some freebies available to you through GitHub. Take a look at what kind of awesome stuff they have for you. Now, after you have your account created, or while you're waiting for approval, we'll go ahead and download the software we need. I've used this git-scm.com/download site because I just want to download the Git GUI product that we have available on the OTC computers. So if you use any of the other download links on GitHub, you'll probably end up downloading the Git desktop, which again is okay, but it's not going to be available to you at OTC. So I want to download for Windows. And I'll go ahead and save that in my downloads folder. And we'll see, because I did just let it do it automatically, so I might end up with one that has Git desktop. Now you could try portable Git. Remember, we are being blocked from executing software off thumb drives on OTC's network, so you wouldn't be able to use it there, but you could use it on your own systems if you wanted to have that installed in a portable fashion. I'm going to go ahead and open this and start the install. Git is open source software, so we'll see that we'll have lots of different options available to it and add-ons. Now it's going to create a shortcut in my start menu. That's fine. And I want to go ahead and use Git from the Windows command prompt. If you want to use Git and the optional Unix tools from the Windows command prompt, that would match the Codecademy training, because the Codecademy training uses Unix commands instead of Windows commands. But I've got that knowledge, so I'm going to skip ahead and go ahead and install just the Windows command prompt. A lot of these line endings have to do with if you're working on Linux machines or Unix machines in Windows, so be aware that you can have some conversions going on between your carriage return line feeds and just line feeds. I'll go ahead and leave that at the default. And all of that is fine. Now, the last thing that it prompted me for was the experimental diff tool. You're welcome to install that if you like. The diff tool is where we can compare differences in files to see what changes should be integrated into our remote machine. So sometimes it can get to be a little tedious if we have many programmers working on the same file at the same time. Git will help us to a point, but then sometimes it just has to show us the differences and raise its hands up in the air and say, I don't know, what do you want me to do? So in addition to that, we can use the diff file to look and see what kind of changes were actually made. I'm going to uncheck this and finish. And my install is complete. And hopefully you've received an email saying that your account is approved, because now we're ready to go to GitHub and create our repository. So I'm already logged on, and I am part of this organization here already, so my screen might look a little bit different than yours, but what we're looking for is the link to create a new repository. I'd like you to name your repository in such a way that it's meaningful. So CIS 171, last name, first initial, then assignments. And that'll help me be able to find things. So if you're not in the 171 class, but you're going to be turning in assignments using GitHub, please use the appropriate course code. Now I want, again, this repository to be private. I'm going to initialize it so that it's ready to go and just create it. We've got everything set up now on our repository. So we're ready to create a local repository so that we can connect the two and keep all our changes up to date. So my repository, remember, is CIS 171 Riley R assignments. And I've created a folder on my desktop, which is where I would like to have all of these assignments that I'm going to keep on my local machine. You, of course, might have a different place where you want to keep yours. And I already have a Git repository set up on my local machine. So if I just go find Git GUI and run it, it's going to default to that repository that I already have. And I don't want that because I want to show you how to use a different one. So I'm going to right click on this folder I've created on my desktop and choose Git GUI here. That's going to give me the option then to create a new repository. It doesn't keep track of where I am. My computer, of course, has this really slow loading the file open dialog box. I'm working off the network from OTC, so it'll be a moment here while we're looking at that. Now, while that's happening, be thinking about how you're going to keep your information in sync. I had to create a repository to hold your assignments. You may want another repository that holds your classwork files that you're working on your own, that are not things that you want to turn in. Okay, that looks good. And I want this to be this desktop folder itself, Riley R assignments. Now, the way GitHub is set up, I'm going to use it to create multiple projects inside this one folder, right? Because I'm an instructor. In the real world, we would probably see one repository for one project. We might see one repository for one whole company. So you could see many, many different setups depending on how people have decided to organize their information. But I'm going to pick my 171 folder and go ahead and create that as a repository. Now, before I do that, I'll show you what's in this folder. Again, just this one application. If I look at my View tab, I am already showing hidden items. There's nothing else in that folder. I'm going to create my repository. And Java GUI immediately says, hey, there's stuff inside this folder, this repository, that have now been staged. These are changes that aren't reflected on the remote repository. So there are things that you want to consider. Now I'm going to go back and look at that folder and show you what's happened. We've had a .git folder added to the folder, and this is what GitHub uses to control the information that it's keeping track of, all of your changes and things like that. So we're going to know that that folder is within our folder stuff, and we're not going to mess with it. Now, if I return to the Git GUI, again, I see that this one project has all these different files that are unstaged. I'll select all of those and stage them. And I may not have needed to select those. I'll let you experiment with that. But now they're staged. They're green. GitHub GUI knows that these need to be committed or sent up to the remote machine. Now, I haven't really told it where my remote repository is, so I'll do that. It is on github.com/OTC-CIS Riley, and your organization may be a little different. And of course I could copy that. And my folder name, I will copy. Make sure I have it right. So I'm saying it's on this site. Here's my organization. I have a typo there, OTC dash. And this is my repository name. I'm going to tell it to go ahead and initialize this remote repository and push my information. And remember, I'm doing this on the Git GUI. And then I'm going to click Add. Okay, so it's mad at me. That's all right, because the remote end said I've already been initialized, because I told you to initialize it when we created the repository. So we can see that we're communicating. Everything's looking good. Now I'm ready to move all of these pieces of source code up to my cloud-based repository. So I'm going to stage all of these, or I've already done that, so I'll just commit them. It says, you got to give me a commit message. A good commit message has the following format. The first line describes what you did. Second line blank. Third line, why is this change good? So I will say, this is a Java program from my desktop. I will save it. And be sure to use these commit messages for your benefit. You want to be very specific in these. Like, these are the changes from 11:30 p.m. the night before the project was due, so that you can roll back to that point if that's something that you need to do. Now I'm ready to commit those changes. You'll see they disappear from the staged area. They're not staged anymore. They are now committed. If I look at my repository online, I should see now that I have one commit. It's not going to tell me a lot of information about it, but if I kept digging, I would be able to find that message that I'd created. Okay, so I have one commit. Now I'm going to go ahead and push that to the remote machine. Yeah, it's going to be my master branch, and if you had branched a project off from somebody else, you might be working with a different branch. I'll push that. And it says that it pushed all that information up to the server. So now I see that I have one branch, and I can see it. And I can do anything that I wanted to. So in this video, we've looked at creating the repository on your local machine and associating your local repository with your remote repository and doing your initial push up to the server so that we had some projects saved. In our next video, we'll look at how we pull information off of GitHub so that we can use it in our projects and then issue updates. So I'll see you then.